street photography is to show the realism of the street. You know, we have reality shows. They're about everything except reality. I want the real thing. Nothing interests me as much as everyday reality. What you bring to the picture is everything you are, everything you have learned, everything you have intellectualized. You have to have ideas of what the world is like and looks like and should be like. That all has to be brought to that picture. So I have the authority of having premediated these things for years, not just at this moment, but what I'm seeing here today in photographing, that has all my experience and learning in it. Now people are very sensitive to being photographed. So whenever I take a picture of a person, I generally, if they don't see me, I go like this. If they see me, or if they walk my distance, I actually have my camera like here and I shoot from the hip. What I don't like is to go like this into somebody's face. I used to do that too. But in the old days, you could do that, nobody was offended.
Fred Herzog is probably, as far as Canada goes, the premier street photographer. He is a pioneer of color photography on the street. You know, he started in 1953, which is so early. Fred's pictures are amazing because they just have a life that is not found, because color is such an incredibly powerful force in the picture to draw this sense of reality in the picture and bring a real world forward that's gone. He did something that was quite revolutionary. I mean, he went out and documented this city in a way nobody else did.
I had an uncle who was a photographer. I found some of his pictures, and I looked at his pictures and I found a book. It was a slim German book, and it says how to take pictures. And I read that, and then I got some magazines which had pictures in them, and it didn't take long and I was totally captivated. As soon as I had a camera, I started photographing, and right I knew this is for me. I want to take pictures of all the things that interest me. Ships, landscapes, high mountains, people who climb in the mountains, my friends. And on my first roll of film, I had the goalie flying through the air about to grasp the ball. That was a good picture then. As the war ended, I was in high school, and my high school book was a picture of Vancouver. And I thought that would be the city I'm going to go to, and so I did. I arrived in Vancouver in May 1953, and I liked it. If you grow up in any city, you consider it average and ordinary. But if you come from Germany to Vancouver, you see something that a Canadian does not see. Actually, what I saw was exotic. It's almost as if I was a reporter and I want to tell the people back home what it looks like here. In this respect, Canada and the USA are very similar. A lot of loud signs, but it puts color into the city. When you look through a longer lens, you saw sign, 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 sign. And to me, that is very rich in I call the American idiom of expression.
In the 1950s, I think Vancouver was really confident about itself. There were lots of nightclubs, social life, life on the street. The whole idea of what a city could be, Vancouver wanted to embrace that. And even physically, there was a richness of signage. Neon signs were very big in Vancouver, and the city was vibrant day and night. I think our city needs to be reminded of the value of history, our own history, our urban history, and he honored that in his project, and with considerable affection.
The vitality of the city, that was my style. The people in the street, the way they look, the way they walk, the way they talk to each other, the way they dress. Body language includes dress. Body language includes hairstyles. Body language includes forms of authority, like I have a picture of a lady holding a cigarette, and she holds the cigarette and her family is also there. The way she holds the cigarette is, I'm in charge. And when I say, let's go, we move. And that kind of body language can be expressed in photographs. And I was very happy when I could do that.
The one thing about Fred's work that I think is amazing is that there is so much unfreedom in the way he had to work, but the pictures themselves do actually have a freedom that would be hard to trace in another era. So I don't think that in Fred's era people were worried about him making photographs of them. And I think that allowed for some subjects to come through and some stories to happen that may not happen today without a lot more subversion, shall we call it.
In the 50s, of course, it was a different kind of world, a different kind of place. You know, people were less suspicious. I think there was less paranoia. People on the street, if somebody had a camera, they had a reason they were taking the picture, and it probably wasn't about your personal identity or anything else. You know, cameras were rare, and they were rare for the good reason, or the kind of cameras he was using, because they were difficult to use. You know, there was no autofocus, there was no exposure meter. It was just pure photography.
I enjoyed doing it. I took pictures whether I thought I could sell them or not. The pictures were my hobby. I had a job. My job was not related to my pictures. It was involved with photography, but a completely different kind of photography. At the University of BC, in the service department called Biomedical Communications, we made the pictures that doctors needed for their lectures. The film of choice in the 1950s was Kodachrome. There was also Anscochrome, which was good, faster, but not as brilliant as Kodachrome.
In the old days, one of the problems with working with color and why people avoided it was, of course, the nature of how did you show it. Because unless you printed, which was expensive on colored paper, you know, there was really no forum for it or had it printed in books. So I think Fred discovered, of course, the projected image is the ultimate image.
It was certainly the most easy and practical way because you had that color slide, and the color slide is a wonderful little object which you can stick into a projector, and then you have a big image on the wall. So I had a projector and I had a screen, and from around 1960 on I gave slideshows at various places, and many architects and artists and just lovers of art went there. And those slideshows were very much appreciated because the people who saw them simply didn't think that photography could produce art like that, but it did. You want to do something for which you are known to be an expert. I wanted that.
Like a lot of people in Vancouver, we knew about Fred because he'd given slideshows and his name would float around and he would appear at openings. But the problem with making sense of Fred's work is that they existed as 35mm slides. So at a certain point when technology started to change, I finally said to Fred, we need to get together and think about what might be possible in the future. So then Fred went around to many people who were able to scan the 35mm slide and make digital prints, and that changed the presentation of his work and allowed me to think about putting his work in the context of art and photography.
In those days, I didn't have a wide-angle lens. I shot everything with a 50mm.
Really?
Yeah. Last night was good because I made a ruling the day before that I don't sign books. So very few people brought books to be signed. There's still some, but I met people who came out and told me how much they liked the show, and I smiled. Not because I wanted to smile, but because I was happy. So it actually was a successful opening. For me, the pictures were above all something to satisfy myself. I wanted to make good pictures for myself.
It's terrific to have Fred around, A, because he's making great pictures, and B, because he's a terrific human being to be with, because he can add to the conversation like no one else can, and he has his own perspective of it.
It's nice to be noticed, and I've gotten used to that. I'm no longer blown away by it. I expect that because I've been successful for the last 4 or 5 years. This is my office, and that's also where I keep a lot of my slides and my notebooks and my travel accounts and my small accessories. That's my music up there. Those are my camera notebooks, which go back to 1950s. And these are slides I'm currently working with. And they're all in trace. And each slide has a code, and the code refers to the position in the tray. If you have 100,000 photographs and you don't have a filing system, you better have a good memory. And I'm 80 now, and I'm beginning to notice my memory is not as good as it always has been. And ideally, I should have somebody in from the National Film Board and document all this and give it codes and numbers and tell me where it should go, but I'm not doing it because I can't be bothered. When I moved in here 35 years ago, this was my workshop. But now it has become workshop, a picture storage, hardware store. This is also a place where I can actually literally escape to. The hall is books and boxes and lumber. And then there's a book room, and then there's a former dark room, which now has become convenient storage for stuff. I've got hundreds of pictures in boxes, 8x10s. I'm not a pack rat because I give a lot of things away. If I don't need something, I give it away. But I can't give pictures away. The pictures are not just my property, but they belong to the art community. I'm an eclectic photographer. And that has to do with the breadth of my being, my interests, my intellect, my friends, the things I find worthwhile in life. For instance, the motorcycle I saw very, very early. It's a machine not made to destroy or to kill or to make things nobody needs. The motorcycle was a machine that was entirely made and designed for pleasure. I had motorcycles myself, and I like to go for long rides. I would go from here to California or Alberta and places like that. I read the motorcycle magazines, and I thought, I can take better pictures than these, and I did. The intersection here is the intersection of Robson and Granville. We're looking south on Granville, and this picture has many items in it which date it.
The signs at that particular moment in the city's history had more weight than the architecture. So if you look at that perspective which runs down the street, the signifying part of the architecture is actually those big, beautiful neon signs which exude light and enthusiasm for the moment.
Andy and I have very similar personalities. He thinks like me and I think like him, so we don't have arguments. As a photographer, I love all my children. So it's very difficult for me to say that's my best one and that's not. Andy knows which is my best one. He has a distance to that which says, I see that stuff and I've seen that before and I've seen that before, but this is different, new, has power, want it.
The relationship between these two people in this picture that you made is remarkable. Fred has worked for over 50 years, and from that there are probably 120-ish pictures that I think really count, that really will stand the test of time. That's taken from thousands and thousands of photographs. So it gets condensed, and that process gets reviewed all the time.
I like the details because that sweep from here to here to here to here makes it a panorama.
Yes, yeah. And the intensity of the interchange between her gaze into this gentleman calling for the taxi cab is really remarkable, because she has such a reserved elegance in waiting at the bus stop with her gloves folded and her wallet out and her bus pass out and her cane properly hitched around her arm.
For me, the miracle of photography is that we have a time tunnel to a scene of 40 years ago, which would be completely forgotten. It lasted only 1 second, and it would be completely unknown and forgotten. But here we have it. This is the magic of all my pictures, that I could literally document my whole life in walks I took around the city, or travels, or other parts of the country, and have pictures of these many moments in time which are irretrievable.
In the world of street photography, the first thing you'll notice is Fred's ability to understand and photograph color. Because of the history of that moment, pretty much everyone who was a serious photographer was photographing in black and white.
I saw very early that color is better. Black and white is a different thing. Black and white up front is abstract. Color is too literal. It can also be tacky. It can also be commonplace.
Color photography was considered vulgar at the time. It was associated with advertising. So it wasn't necessarily a popular move to make, to start experimenting with color.
Fred had probably little or no expectations of people having to accept his work. He was just going to make it, and if people thought it one way or the other, it was not going to dissuade him from going out in the street the next week and making pictures. That's the success of his work, and that's the success of why people want to see his work now. Even if you're defeated or you're relegated to a lower realm, but you feel you have a higher purpose, project-wise, subject-wise, that's a pretty interesting place to be, and I think people can perceive that in his pictures, that at one point it wasn't of interest to an audience, but now it's an overwhelming interest.
This is the wonderful thing about photography. Every person is his own style. There's no such thing as style. You don't acquire style by going to night school. You don't acquire a style by reading a book that's published by one of the film manufacturers, and it's called All the Cheap Tricks in One Volume. That's not how you acquire style. Style is you. This is a beautiful scene here. Look at this. That's a wide-angle scene made to measure for me. I'm going to get that right now. Let me just get back. I want to get it all in. That is wonderful. I like the garage too. It's nice from this side. This is called Strathcona, and I've come here since 1957.
It's still old Vancouver. There's a uniqueness to this area that every house is different. Everybody has a unique way of expressing themselves in their homes, their landscape, the gardens. You know, you go down here, some of these buildings are 100 years old. You know, some of them are in decline, others are fixed. Every building is a different color. The visual stimulation is tremendous.
Photography does not work well with new things. It works well with used things. It works well with slightly messy things. It works well with original things.
Fred's work definitely has already impacted younger generations. I mean, I teach at the art college here, and the students want nothing more than to hear about his work, to see his work. Realism has always been both difficult and desired by publics of all ages, and I think in Vancouver, because of the kind of history of art making here, Fred's work is seen as a kind of freedom, a kind of someone who did what they wanted to do without any expectations of societal reward for that work. And I think that's what makes some of the pictures really great.
The fact that now, basically at the age of 80, people are finally recognizing what he's always been, a brilliant photographer who is a pioneer. And of course, yeah, there's no such thing as an overnight success in real terms. He got his 10,000 hours in I don't know how long ago. He's a phenomenon at his age.
I found photography, and then perhaps photography found me, but that came in the last 10 years, you know. Until I was 75, I was unknown. It's only now that all of a sudden my stuff is the right stuff.